Okay, here's the deal. You work in an apothecary shop dealing with old men, and hello, sailor! I'm just gonna bring you to my bedroom and... Oh, this is so much better. And that's the plot of Carved in Stone, a fully voiced monster dating sim where, yes, we can cuddle with the hot gargoyle men.
You can trust me when I say I'm no boy.
Before we get into it, a major heads up that this is an eroge, so mature audiences only. Scattered golden rays force their way through the congested gray sky, reflecting off of the wide assortment of potion bottles on the back wall. I continued to sweep the floors and watched as the dust and dirt fluttered and glittered in the sunlight. As I swept my way behind the counter, I caught a glimpse of something shiny in the broken mirror. Something I couldn't bring myself to ignore. As I peered closer, I felt my heart turn to stone. What I saw was a singular silver hair. Reaching tentatively with my fingers, I lifted the single strand to further inspect, hoping that my eyes were failing me, and preferably that I'd gotten some lint in my hair from sweeping the floors. No such luck. It was a cruel twist of fate, a clear sign of my age staring back at me, almost taunting. I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose, and cursed time itself. "Hey, Missy!" A dirty, little man grunted, startling me out on my morning session, the sun nearly disappearing. It was the town drunkard. I did what I could to put on my best customer service voice and welcoming smile. "What can I get you for today, sir?" "Got any more of that, stuff?" His description wasn't exactly helpful. I hoped he hadn't mistaken my shop for the liquor store. I'm afraid you'll have to be a touch more specific. The blue stuff. Helps settle my stomach. I know what tincture you're looking for. Just give me a moment. I turned, inspecting any blue bottles I found on the shelves, eventually finding the exact medicine he was referring to. "How much do I owe you?" "There'll be 4 silver pieces." 4 silver pieces? Awfully steep, don't you think? I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. It hadn't been too much other times. Was he trying to purposely be a bother today? Was he that bored? Do I? Wait, hey, that's the price. I mean, bread is expensive these days, my dude. Well, I'm terribly sorry, but that's the price. It's difficult to get a hold of, and my vendor had to raise the price to accommodate. There's nothing I can do. I can't go any lower. There was a beat too long of uncomfortable silence, until he made a horrible mouth sound and spat onto the floor. I had just finished cleaning. I sucked in my bottom lip to keep myself from doing something I'd regret. Now my stomach was swirling. No wonder such a shrewd wench like you hasn't found a husband. Hey! Rude! Well, I can't say that I'm married, but I've got someone on the way. It stung more than I cared to admit. Normally, I'd just have written it off as the babblings of an unpleasant man. But somehow, today, or rather lately, these sort of comments dug their way under the skin more than usual. You should be focused on finding one before you end up dying alone in this place. If you don't starve first, with your prices being the way they are. The devil you are, overcharging a poor old man. I fought for this village when it came under attack by a dragon, you know. Just so you could overcharge your saviors. Ungrateful bitch. Now that's enough! His eyes grew wide, somehow surprised by my outburst. He made a move into his garments, and I braced myself for the worst. Reaching for the broom, I set aside behind me. But before I could so much as lift it off the ground, there was another voice.
Drop it, lest you lose your hand right along with it.
God, his voice is way too soft. Hang on a moment.
Drop it, lest you lose your hand right along with it.
I'm just protecting myself, my dude. The haggard man froze for a moment before swinging in the direction of the voice. I hadn't even heard anyone else come in. Who the hell do you think you're talking to? Hello! Hi! He blinks. Oh, okay. His voice lost all momentum as his eyes registered the man towering over him in the doorway. I recognized him. He was a regular. Though I didn't know his name, I never had the courage to ask. The man stood, blinking at him stupidly.
You need to leave.
The room was filled with a sudden chill, accompanied by an ominous aura radiating from the man, one the likes I had never felt before. It sent the drunkard scrambling for the doorway, nearly tripping over his feet as he did so. The man watched in disgust as he fled.
Cunt.
His dark expression and aura dissolved by the time he met my eyes, sending a chill down my spine. The last remnants of the sudden cold had come when he'd threatened the bothersome man. When did it get so drafty in here?
Are you okay?
He asked, saving me from thoughts of more potential repairs. I'm fine. I growled in the direction of where the drunkard had stood just before. You should check on him. He probably cracked his skull against the pavement, I said, gesturing to the doors in my head. He was about to get a broom handle down his throat had you not stepped in when you did. Luckily, I wasn't in any real danger. He could barely stand, let alone stab me. The striking man bit back a laugh, smiling to himself. I'm thankful you handled it for me, though.
It wasn't an issue, madam.
I lifted my hands as if to ward off the pleasantries. You can just call me Lion. Ma'am or madam just makes me feel old.
Well, I'd hate to make you feel old.
It was too late for that, unfortunately.
I'm surprised I never asked for your name before. It's very fitting. If you don't mind me saying so, it's lovely. Just like yourself.
Really? Flattery, huh? He didn't need to compliment me, especially if there was no real truth to it. It felt like he was doing everything possible to ease my nerves. At least it seemed genuine, and was a nice change of pace from the conversation before. I'm fine. It's not the worst of what I've encountered running this place. You're too kind, young man, I retorted good-naturedly.
You can trust me when I say, I'm no boy.
Oh, clearly you're not! A devilish smirk grazed his sharp features, his eyes squinting in amusement. My breath got caught in my throat at the mere sight. His age was evident. He was all man, and that much was for sure. Sure, he wasn't a fresh youth, but he definitely wasn't old. Mature was a better phrase. Well-aged was better. He looked pristine. Even in 10 years, I imagine he'd still look that way. But men had that luxury to mature, whereas women just expired, apparently. The thought had always sickened me. There were beautifully aged women who wore their white hair like crowns, but I evidently wasn't one of those women. My crown was made out of eroding poison. And your name? He smiled widely.
Carrick.
Carrick. I tested his name absent-mindedly. He flashed me a toothy smile, watching my lips as I said it.
It certainly sounds better when you say it.
I shook my head, blood rushing to my cheeks. Was there something I could get you?
I'd like to buy whatever that gentleman was going to, as well as my usual. It's the least I can do, since I made you lose some business.
That's kind of you, but you don't have to. It's no trouble. His coin is worth nothing to me.
Perhaps mine will have more value?
I mean, if you want to pay me in other ways, I'm more than down. A cheeky smile graced his features. I nodded, smiling, looking down at my hands on the counter.
Actually, I'm going to browse for a bit. If you could get me those other two things, I'd appreciate it.
No problem. The rock polish, right? That's what you usually get? His eyebrows rose.
You remembered. You're good at your job.
I waved off his compliment as well as him. Luckily, he gave me some time to recover from his overwhelming presence. I'd always found him to be a fine-looking man, but seeing him so close, watching him speak and smile, saying such kind things, it made me feel like a teenager. He's simply gorgeous, almost an ethereal beauty, much like a painting or a statue, carved from stone. Carrick. He'd been a regular for at least a year. He'd suddenly appeared one day, around the time they started building the new cathedral across the way. Maybe he worked in the chantry? He didn't really look the type, but who was I to say? Oddly enough, I don't think I've ever seen him shop during the day. Perhaps his job kept him busy while the sun was up. What kind of job would someone like him have? I suppose I could ask him, though every time I think about talking to him, I get so nervous. He is too enticing. Couldn't be a priest, because if so, he'd make many a sinner. Maybe he built the cathedral? He certainly had the muscles for it. I wished I had seen him build it, watching his muscles tense, dripped with sweat, glowing in the hot afternoon sun, breathing heavily, drinking water as it dripped down his body. I watched as he poked and prodded some of the bottles around the room, practically gliding as he moved. His hair was luxurious, his eyes a deep shade of red, and he had near-perfect skin. He was a marvel. How could someone like him have ever called me lovely? Perhaps he was just being nice. If I was even 10 years younger, I'd have caught his eye. My body was better. No sagging underarms, no bags under my eyes, no gray hairs. If only he could have seen me then. It was a shame. Time was truly a curse, at least when you're a woman. Perhaps it was nice to pretend his words had real meaning. The only men who'd take fancy to me now were drunkards and the desperate. How long had it been since I'd been with a man? Felt like decades, even if maybe only a couple years had passed. Even so, the relationships were short-lived. I'd always preferred my work, my own company, over something so shallow. Sex was serviceable, felt good while it lasted, but it was never very long. Ended right as I was about to feel good. Probably because the proper pounding happened right as he was about to, explode. I could make myself blow much harder, with much less headache. Perhaps Carrick was beautiful, but beautiful didn't equate to a skillful lover. Perhaps he could be in my late-night fantasies, however. I ended up sulking so much I hadn't seen Carrick return initially. His eyebrows knitted together in concern.
I know it isn't my business, but I apologize on behalf of that bastard. I can't stop thinking about it.
Nah, please. You don't have to. I really am fine. He didn't look convinced. Hell, even I didn't buy it. But I had to be fine. I had to believe it somehow. I couldn't let any of what he said get to me. I couldn't listen to anyone when it came to how I felt about myself. That was a recipe for certain disaster. I suppose he said it quite harshly, but there was some truth to what he said. Carrick gave me a dumbfounded look. Maybe he was young, but I didn't think that was that hard of a concept to grasp. I guess I'm a good deal older than you. I'm sure someday you'll understand, though. Or maybe you never will, because you were drop-dead gorgeous and a man. Women my age, there's a certain set of things we're expected to do, and one of those, being married and having children, are two I've yet to engage with. There's a good chance I won't experience either. He stared at me astonished. I probably should have let it go. I'd argued my stance on this far too many times with far too many people. He wouldn't understand, and I didn't need to explain myself. Even so, I did. I suppose it had come naturally to me at that point. I do realize how strange it is for me to be a woman with her own business. People wonder if I'm depressed or lonely. I honestly don't think so. The happiest day of my life was when the shop opened. I was finally able to put my magic to good use and sell potions that help people. I realized only then what I was doing. I'd said my piece. He didn't care. Time to change the subject and pretend that didn't happen. Your potions. I'm sorry. Let me get that for you.
Wait.
And I did. Like I was being compelled to.
You don't have to do anything.
Now it was my turn to be confused. I said I'd get you those items. I got distracted. I guess I'm getting tired. The older I get, the easier I go to bed.
Why do you speak as though you're on death's door?
The words lost me. I don't know how to respond. Why did I? I mean, I guess I'm not elderly, but I'm not the young woman I was when I opened this place. I even have gray hairs now, see? Carrick didn't even look. He was still looking at me like I'd smashed his polish onto the floor.
Is that why?
Why what?
Why you've been so down?
My silence must have been his answer.
Look, if I may say so, I think that's complete and utter bullshit.
I looked around, feeling uncomfortable once again. Had I upset him? Where did I place that broom?
You don't need to have kids or get married. You run one of the most successful shops in town. You're thoughtful and hardworking. And, if I may be so bold, a fine woman.
I felt my throat tighten. I had to cough and wipe my nose to be rid of the forming tears. His words cut deep. Please, you don't have to say any of this. I am not one to delude myself. I'm a practical person. You don't need to appeal to my emotions or anything.
Please don't listen to that lowly fool. Or anyone. You must know your worth.
My stomach flipped involuntarily at his tone. His words were so warm, they resonated somewhere deep within me. A tear slipped down my cheek and onto the counter below. I could only touch it, shocked, deeply touched. Or then I realized, like he'd spoken to a part of me that was way out of reach. I moved towards the door, going to lock it, not letting myself stand in place sobbing in front of a stranger. I could tell by the way the sky looked that it was near closing time. I didn't care if I closed earlier than usual today. Carrick was behind me, preparing to leave. Or at least, that's what I thought. My apologies. You can stay if you'd like. I just wanted to get started on closing. I don't want anyone else walking in.
So, it's all right if I stay?
I nodded. Yeah, I don't mind. Honestly, it was good to have him there in case that drunkard decided he wanted to come back for round 2. Let me check you out. We made our way back to the counter. I finally retrieved the rock polish and the blue tonic. Carrick set down a common healing potion. Will this be all? I asked, going through the normal sequence of questioning without thinking. He nodded, just watching me. It'll be 6 silvers. He went to retrieve his pouch and set the silver onto the counter. What's the rock polish for anyway? Do you work at the cathedral across the way? He looked like he hadn't expected that. He was so taken aback. I almost regretted asking in the first place. Did he think me weird for asking?
You could say that. I spend a lot of time there.
Did you help build it?
No, well, the truth of the matter is that it's complicated.
A mysterious one. Was he involved in some shady business? That would explain the dark aura and the fact that he was so muscular. Maybe he was a hitman, or involved in underground criminal organizations. Maybe he was the devil himself. He certainly had the look for it.
The shop's closed now, right?
I nodded.
Does that mean I can speak to you as a person, rather than a shopkeeper?
I could only chuckle at that, unsure of what he meant. What is it that you want to say that you can't say to a shopkeeper?
At the risk of making you uncomfortable, I feel it's best I be honest with you. Is that okay? If you don't like what I have to say, I'll leave. And I won't bother you any further. If you wish it so, I won't even shop here anymore.
As he continued, a heaviness formed in my chest. Just what was he wanting to talk about? Was he sent here to kill me? Had I done bad business?
So can I tell you?
Yeah? You can. What do you want to tell me? It seems important. My anxiety only grew as he looked around, looking for a way to say what he was going to say. Was it that bad? The waiting was sure to kill me. Finally, he spoke, slow at first.
I lied before.
About? I must have asked with my eyes?
I already knew your name. It is lovely. Just like you. That part was true.
That was it? He lied about not knowing my name? Well, that was certainly strange, but It wasn't anything to make such a fuss about.
The truth is, I know a lot about you. More than you think I do.
Okay, I didn't expect this to be the story of a stalker, but okay, I'm into it. That stopped me in my tracks.
I've watched you for a while.
Okay, go on. What?
Just as you worked.
Because you spend so much of your time at the cathedral? I asked, hoping that was it. Hoping even more that he wouldn't lie about it either.
Yes, precisely. I also have made it a habit to visit here more. To see you.
Oh, that's kind of sweet. Why? I asked stupidly.
Because I'm drawn to you. I have been for years.
Years? How many?
3 years. The same amount of time since the cathedral was built.
Why are you telling me this? What do you want? It was a dangerous question, with an answer I don't think I was prepared to hear. Even so, it was better to know. Why? He bit his lip.
Is it not obvious?
He smiled wryly.
Maybe. You just want to hear me say it.
I nodded. That wasn't false. I didn't want to misinterpret this. Best I hear it directly from the source.
I'm telling you this because I want you to be mine.
Okay?
And more than that, I want to be yours.
What difference was there between being his or being mine? More importantly, had he said what I thought he had said just then?
It's honestly disheartening to see you so doubtful. Even though I'm telling you this, clear as day. You can't believe it.
I stopped myself, could only blink as he continued to speak.
Is my longing for you that hard to believe? What happened to break your confidence so?
I dropped my head. Truthfully, I didn't know. There wasn't a singular instance that turned me from a bright-eyed, bold girl into a gray-haired, tentative woman. Perhaps it was the natural order of things. I just grew up.
But I've only known you for 3 years. Are you truly a different woman?
I thought back. No, I wasn't. But with every year, watching the amount of people who'd come to settle in this village, the refugees flooding the cathedral, I watched women become brides and mothers in the same year. I never really wanted for those things, at least not to the extent others had. I never sought them out, but being looked at differently, being compared to them, and how different my life was to theirs. I felt like I was doing everything in my life all wrong, like my very existence was an outlier, a mistake, something that should never have come to be. Even though this was the life I cried, sweated, and prayed for, I couldn't find joy in it the way I once had, not when I shared it alone. I don't know what the answer to that is, Carrick. All I know is that I haven't felt comfortable in my own skin in a long time. He watched me with pity. It hurt. I disappointed him, but he wasn't alone. I was disappointed in myself. How had I let the opinions of others corrode me so? I'm sorry. The woman you pined for doesn't exist anymore. She may never again. Carrick shook his head. I'm sure he was in denial. As absurd as that was, but what I said was true. I said it before. I'm practical. I might not like it, but that is the way of things. I don't make these rules. I just have to live by them.
Nothing has changed. Your essence, it's the same. It's just dulled.
My essence? What did he mean? I needn't ask. It was written all over my face.
I've noticed that your soul has changed. I've watched it waver like the flame of a long-burning candle. But it isn't too late. It can be remedied.
How exactly? Even when all I could think was how absurd this all was, I still kept bringing myself to inquire further.
I honestly don't know. Maybe it's foolish, But I thought maybe if I told you, you'd be able to find out for yourself. You're very intelligent. If you don't know now, you will. But that is the main thing I wanted to tell you. I know it's hard, but your core, the main part of your soul, is still there. It's just being dimmed. You have to find the spark to ignite it again. It may feel hopeless now, but it's not permanent. You just have to be patient with yourself and make peace with the changing of the seasons.
That made it click. Even when I lacked all the critical information, the intricacies behind the words he spoke, I still managed to find relief. The weight in my chest lifted ever so slightly. Maybe it was hard to believe he could see my soul. Perhaps it was figurative, but there was a truth to it. I'd been so upset by such minor things, because it added to a truth about myself that I was starting to believe, adhering to a reality that wasn't my own. This time, no tears fall, but I felt a deep ache in my body. My nerves were on fire. An involuntary smile snuck its way onto my face.
There she is,
he said, almost a whisper, matching my own smile. He looked at me like I'd come down from the celestial realm.
I suppose my work here is done. You're remarkable. You struggle so much, mostly alone. And yet you don't let it harden you. You're still as fiery, as passionate about your work, and your effect on the people around you as I imagine you always had. You truly inspire me.
Carrick, why are you being so kind? It hurts.
You need to hear it. And if you're still willing to listen, I could tell you more. Remind you of what you've forgotten.
I could only nod. Still not understanding, but willing to listen. I took a seat onto the counter, resting my aching feet and ankles. He watched me all the way, moving his hand closer once I was sat, but not quite touching. I could tell he debated touching me, like I'd burn him if he did. Filled with a newfound boldness, I set my hand on his. He looked at me surprised, but didn't address it, following through with what he was going to say instead. I listened intently.
I was drawn to you from the moment I saw you. Of course, it wasn't love like in the poems, but rather fascination. Like the answer to a question that plagues the masses. You were my unanswered question. And so I watched, and learned much about you. And watching you is easy, of course. You're an enchanting woman.
Can you not feel the souls of others? Is it just mine? I decided to ask, almost humoring him. I couldn't say I believed in it, but I wanted to hear what he'd say.
I can feel others, anyone who I choose to. That drunkard was almost tainted and rotten.
I don't know if I can believe that. He just seems sad. I don't think he's broken or anything. Just in a bad place. Misguided.
That's a wonderful trait of yours. And you're not wrong. He can change. But it means he'd have to want to change. And so many don't. Even after the horrible things he said to you. You show him so much courtesy and respect.
I shrugged. Of all things, I suppose it was just my nature. I didn't like the bastard. It was true, but that didn't mean he was damned.
We all see our ugliest sides. And we let them become who we are, instead of fighting against them.
I felt guilty, as clearly I too was susceptible to it. What's your ugly side, Carrick? He paused, chewing over his response for a moment.
I'm obsessed.
Well, clearly! Obsessed? With? But I already knew the answer.
With a question. Would you give me the time of day?
That was a question? Would I give him the time of day? I mean, it's evening. I can't say. I don't know what that would entail. For me. For us.
Only as much as you were willing to give.
I just know so little. What I do know is good, but it makes me worried there's plenty you're hiding, and I don't know if I'd like the ugly side of you.
I believe I could help remedy that.
How so? I always figured those were the kinds of things you experienced over time.
Now, before I do what I'm about to, I need you to promise me that you'll try to stay calm.
I thought for a moment, contemplating once again if I wanted to know. Ultimately, I felt like we'd come this far. I wanted to give him a chance. I promise. I'll try. Oh! Hello there! Where did your shirt go? It was silent, almost deafeningly so. I watched in pure shock as horns sprouted from his head, wings sprung from his back, his body swelled in size. His shirt had given way to his chest growing, the garment splitting and falling to the floor between us. Along with it, his boots split to pieces, and in place were taloned feet. Before long, he just stood in his new form, towering over me even more than he had before. My eyes are drawn somewhere very polished, I'd say. I sat in awe, paralyzed, as I studied him, not sure what I felt, other than an ever-present feeling of sudden arousal. It only added to my ever-growing confusion. He looked terrified.
Are you all right? Did I scare you?
I shook my head slowly. Not scared, just bricked up, just very much. Would you like me to help polish you with that? I didn't say what I was feeling because the reality wasn't something I felt I should be admitting to at the moment.
Do I look weird?
I shook my head. By normal standards, sure, but to me, he was still the same alluring man. His presence had somehow reached a level I hadn't thought possible. He was more than a painting or a statue. He was a league of his own. He was, by all definitions, a masterpiece. It was many more moments before either of us had made a sound. Surprisingly, I was the first to break the silence, speaking a truth I'd denied myself before, in fear. A fear that didn't come naturally to me, that had come from feeling rejected by everyone around me. Carrick hadn't, though, and so I spoke the truth and I casted away my shock. You are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. His face reddened at that. He smiled softly, unable to form a sentence, so I did it for him. Just, what are you exactly?
Demon? That's what your people would call me. However, my experiences are mostly human. I eat, I sleep. I have fears and I have desires.
Am I one of them? I mean, I could be. Hey, you want to feed on me? Do you want to sleep with me?
But I am also only able to be when the sun is gone.
Is that why I never saw him during the day? He was nocturnal.
Those guardians built atop the cathedral. Those stone creatures. That's what I am during the day.
A gargoyle, you mean? He nodded.
The human word, yes.
Why show this form to me? I could have screamed or sent the mob after you. Why take that risk? The answer came to him easily.
I knew you wouldn't. And I was right. More importantly, I showed you because it's something you must know, if you're to decide whether or not you want me to be yours.
The more he spoke about the prospect of him being mine, it became ever so slightly real. By be yours, do you mean as a friend, or... I had to force the words out, the fear of rejection threatening to stop me. As a lover. I hated to even say it. If it was the former, how could I look at myself in the mirror? I'd have to break it more just to avoid that reality. I hated myself for feeling that way. After I had just decided to cast my fear aside, I suppose knowing the source didn't necessarily mean it solved the problem.
I've never thought of friends the way I think of you.
My heart swelled. My stomach fluttered. My palms sweat so much that my hands started to slip on the counter below me. I was made more aware of my body in his presence as he stood dangerously close. His eyes were even more intense in this form, especially when he spoke such desires into existence. A shadow was cast over me by his sheer presence. The clock was ticking. He was wanting the answer he'd obsessed over. But could I give it to him? Or would my body speak for me, and I'd grow to regret my decision later? The truth of the matter was I was already attracted to Carrick, but seeing the side of him only added to it. It was easy enough to say what he wanted to hear, when all I wanted was to feel the form that stood before me, flushed against my own, so much smaller in comparison, to know what he smelled like, felt like, tasted like, probably rock! I hadn't thought I was ever a prospect for someone like him, even more so now that I knew what he truly was. Even now, I still couldn't wrap my head around it, but I was practical. He was here before me, saying his intentions. I could ask anything I wanted to know right now. I didn't need to wrap my head around it when I could explore him for myself. Like I had when I mixed ingredients in a potion. I had to see what worked. I had to run a shop for years to truly understand the intricacies that came with being a business owner. I had to dig my hands into the earth in order to make sense of reality when it began to slip. Carrick, tell me, what is it about me physically that you're drawn to? His demeanor shifted, his smirk finally returning, as he leaned closer to me, still not quite touching.
Could I show you instead?
Hey, yo! Show me! Should I? Would I be doing myself harm? Enough. Thoughts don't belong here. They are paralyzing. They are come to intuitive in an experiment. Results first and think over it later. Please do. That was all the permission he needed. His hand rose, now easily double the size it was before, and I almost lost my nerve. Two of his fingers alone were larger than half the man's... Two of his fingers alone were larger than half the man's, tools I had been with. It made me wonder, what did that mean for his... I had to know! His hand hovered for a moment before his fingers found their way into my hair, pushing the strands behind my ear, far more gentle than I thought possible for someone who looked like him.
Your hair.
He looked at me for a moment, for the first time, able to see the subject of his desire so close. His hand moved to my cheek, a thumb tracing my cheekbone.
Your eyes.
The warmth of his palm, of his thumb, trailed its way down my face, only stopping when it reached my lips. That alone sent an electric shock through my mind.
And especially your lips.
I mean, these lips can go many places, my man. He stood, watching me watch him as he slowly began, parting them just enough so he could run his thumb along the length of my bottom lip. His expression changed from something adoring to something more sedated, his eyes practically dilating. We both knew what was to come at the next moment. Words were no longer our friends. We spoke plenty. Now it was time to act! I opened my mouth to trace my tongue along his thumb, wrapping my lips around it in order to properly taste it. I practically drooled at the sensation. It tasted of nothing but my own saliva, and still, I was already going lightheaded. I peeked out of one of my eyes to see his expression. His eyes were glazed over as he watched me.
Why does that feel so good?
I couldn't answer him, nor would I. I was determined not to say another word unless it was screaming his name. I spread my legs as I continued sucking, beckoning him to fill the space any way he saw fit. I hoped he wouldn't lose his nerve. He'd said all the right things, now to see if he would put it into action. He wanted me, right? He watched me. He waited this long to say anything. Had he touched himself to the thought of me? How much had he envisioned this moment? I wanted to ask him all those things, but there would be a time to speak again. Luckily, he stood closer, removing his thumb from my mouth. A trail of spit hung between them for a second. He leaned in close. It was only when he stood before me that his nerve seemed to falter.
Can I kiss you?
Yes! Or perhaps not. He only looked like he had. He almost looked like a young man at that moment. Had he not known the touch of another? I only answered by bringing my hands to his face and pulling him to my hungry lips. There was one clear way to find out. Regardless of his history, I was experienced enough for us too. Perhaps I could train him into a suitable lover. That thought excited me. He groaned against me. His lips were warm and plump. It was uncomfortably slow as he kissed me so gently. It was wonderful, but wasn't enough. I gave him my tongue, which he met with his own deliciously. He had the makeup of a wonderful lover. If his kiss was anything to go off of, he'd definitely been kissed before, and I found it hard to imagine anyone getting to this point with him and not falling under his spell. He tasted like water from a fresh, cool spring. It had been so long since I'd been kissed, but I hadn't forgotten the basics. He'd gone slow enough that I had ample time to remember the little things that made men fall to their knees. I breathed into him, tangling my fingers into his long, silky hair. Our lips worked away at each other, moving between soft, loving kisses to famished tongues satiating the other. I moaned into his mouth as he started to untie the binding on my dress. I practically heard the celebratory sounds of trumpets as he leisurely undid them without so much as even looking. His kissing hadn't suffered either. The theory of him never having been with any previous lovers before was eroding away with every passing minute. Oh my God, he's huge! Sweetly, he sat by my side, lifting my upper body into his arms and chest. Despite being made of stone, he felt plenty warm and human. Also, we had to skip quite a bit. Let's just say I may need a new bed. But if you guys do want to catch those scenes, a link to that is in the Patreon in the comments. But anyway, he smelt of incense and salt. I looked up at him, puckering my lips. He captured them only a moment later. I broke the kiss, resting my eyes as I listened to his still racing heart. You feel human.
You sound surprised.
Aren't you a stone creature?
I have the capacity to become stone, just as I have the capacity to appear human.
So you're telling me I can polish the rock?
I am both. I didn't think you'd want to make love to marble.
Oh, you'd be surprised. I giggled. With the way I pleasured myself on his still figure before, I definitely wasn't opposed to the idea. He must have read my mind.
Whatever form you prefer, that's what I'll provide.
There was no other form I'd prefer more than this. I mean, sure, the human form of Carrick was enough to entice a fantasy, but the way I felt about this form and every aspect of it, I'd never long for a human man for as long as I shall live. I'd sooner go to statues. At least they had the capacity to make me orgasm. I stared adoringly up at him, being whisked away by a peace I hadn't felt in ages. He pushed a strand of my hair back, admiring me as much as I had him.
You look tired. Don't stay up on my account.
Do you sleep?
Yes, just during the day. The remaining time, I keep watch. I'll be watching for the return of that drunkard.
My guardian.
I'd like to be. More than that, I'd like to be yours, in body and in soul. I know that I can't rush such things. I've had far more time than you. But I hope you'll consider it. Your life is, of course, your own, and I don't want to intrude on it.
Carrick, it's true I don't know what that truly entails for me. It sounds wonderful, as all fantasies do. But you're stone for at least half of my life. I could never do with you what others do with their own partners. I don't long for children, and marriage has always been optional, but They are impossible with you.
You're not wrong. It's a lot to ask. I just know if I don't, I'll regret it all my life.
Do you not have other prospects?
You mean partners? I've had them. But when I move, I live a new life, under a new name. The men I was before are no longer me. The man that I am today belongs to you.
How long will that last? How long until you seek a new home, a new identity?
I don't know. But what I do know is that this is the longest I've been in one place for a century.
3 years?
Your presence, seeing you day in and day out, your soul has kept me here. It's also caused me to question everything I know about mortal living. Most importantly, I believe that instead of seeking humans out for pleasure, I've found someone with whom I'd like to forge a bond with in soul.
Wait. You're telling me that other people have been polishing your rock hard for ages now? Is that what you're telling me? My dude! It's fine. I ain't judging.
I always knew, however, that this was always a possibility. You may not need me in your life, but I'm afraid as things stand, I need you in mine.
I mean, hey, who else you gotta get your rock polish from?
Even if it's just as your friend or guardian.
My heart was tormented by straining and aching alike. He always had a way of speaking that resonated so deeply. The decision was still my own, but somehow that made it harder. He wasn't forcing his way into my life. He knew who I was and what my life consisted of, and wanted me anyway. I just wished you had given me more than tonight to decide on such things. If I knew you more, I would have the tools to make a more informed decision. To tell you with certainty what I want. Carrick nodded, understanding disparagingly, not having tried sooner.
I also needed time to decide I wanted to do this. I hadn't planned to today either, but once the opportunity presented itself, I threw caution to the wind.
And your pants apparently? Like, holy hell, they're ripped all the way through. How are you gonna get out of here later?
We've had a wonderful night. One I'm sure to never forget. No matter how many lives I live, I'm glad that you gave me the chance. I cannot ask any more of you than that. I can only hope that you'll give me more. But no matter what your answer is, I will not resent you. Your decisiveness, your honesty, and integrity are just a few of the many things I fell in love with.
In love? He's in love with me.
I'm in love with you. I know you can't return that sentiment just yet, but I believe if you got to know me, you'd be able to fall in love with me too. So, what will it be?
I want you to be mine. Carrick looked surprised, like he'd prepared for me to say anything else.
Are you sure?
I nodded, stroking his cheek, and I don't regret it.
A glowing review.
He chuckled. I swatted his nose with my finger. You've surprised me. Brought out a side of myself I thought was lost.
I didn't do much. Just reminded you of who you already were. I'm glad I could help in any way I could.
I'm sure you are.
I'm at your beck and call whenever you want to feel better about yourself.
I smiled shyly.
So, we're lovers, then. You won't have any more relations with boys?
And you won't with girls? He shook his head.
Absolutely not. I believe you've just ruined me for all other prospects forever.
And that's why I'm called the Size Queen. A tad dramatic, aren't we? He shook his head once more.
You are part of my being. I am no longer myself without you. I hope, with time, I can become the same for you.
Actually, would Size Emperor be better? I don't know. I believe I will. I don't think I'd have agreed to any of this if I didn't see potential.
Good. Very good.
Size Lord! Okay, this is just getting out of hand. This is really getting out of hand. He looked incredibly relieved.
I may not be here when you awake, but know that I will be here every night before you go to sleep.
He placed a gentle kiss to my forehead as I began to drift to sleep, comforted in his arms, comforted that he would return, that this wasn't just a single night's worth of excitement and comfort.
Sleep well, my love.
I drifted off into a wonderful, dreamless sleep. As I opened the shop the following day, I could feel Carrick's eyes on me as I worked. I was beaming beneath them, sweeping and humming a pleasant tune. All the while, until the sun fell again, I longed to share another night full of chats and caressing. Carrick was at the door as soon as the sun had left. He continued to watch me as I closed, leaning against the counter with that familiar, impish expression. We chatted idly about what he'd seen, and questions of what I'd done, sharing stories, laughter, and flattering words. It became our everyday routine. He fit into my life perfectly. I knew to have the love of someone like him is something that could only have ever been achieved when I had one first for myself. This was my life, and I was grateful he wanted to be a part of it. But if he hadn't, that was okay too. To have been acknowledged for my hard work, loved from a distance, and worshipped in the heat of the night, those were the things I deserved, to be cared for, thought of in the same way I had for others. If I continued to treat others in the way I wanted to, then that kind of love would find me, whether it was to be as a lover, a friend, or somewhere in between. I was happy to have him for as long as that lasted. If he decided he wanted to live a new life, free from me, I cared for him enough to let him have it. As long as he had the respect to come to me first about it, then I could ask for nothing more. And if he never left my side, always watched me, and left before the early morning sun, then I could ask for nothing more. No matter what was to happen from this moment onward, what we had was carved into my heart like stone. The end. Okay, I'm a little curious. What happens if we said, can we share these nights together still? To fall in love and have a relationship like you're asking, I think that's beyond my capabilities at present. Carrick smiled sadly.
I assumed as much. It's as I said before, it's your choice. I can live with that.
I thank you for lifting my spirits, for bringing me comfort and reminding me of a part of myself I had thought was lost.
I did little. Thank you for allowing me to indulge for a time.
Carrick, forgive me. If I asked to do this part again, would you be willing? Or have I asked for too much? Carrick brought his hand down to my cheek.
I'll take any part of you I can get, even if it's in body alone.
Ah!
I am at your beck and call, as your partial lover, guardian, and friend.
I smiled, overtaken by the sentiment. I closed my eyes, relieved and comforted by him. I was thankful I could have this when I needed it.
Sleep well.
I drifted off into a wonderful, dreamless sleep. As I opened the shop the following day, I could feel Carrick's eyes on me as I worked. I was beaming beneath them, sweeping and humming a pleasant tune. Okay, I'm pretty sure most of this goes on the same way as it did before, so we're just gonna skip to the last ending where it's supposed to get. Okay, what if I said that I wanted to just give it to him for 2 silvers? For you, 2 silvers. The man lit up. What a sweet thing you are. How is someone like you not married yet? The world has really gone to hell. If I was a few years younger. He never finished his sentence, opting to scan his eyes along my figure instead. I resisted the urge to cringe outwardly. You're too kind. I'm serious. You've got the hips. You'd have at least 10 of my children. My own wife was only able to have 1. Darn shame. We were never even able to make more. Said it cost her pain or whatever. Okay, screw off, my dude. This conversation grew more uncomfortable by the second. I'm sure that wasn't the only reason she stopped sleeping with him. The smell alone was horrid. I usually made it a habit to put a perfume balm under my nose when he came in to mask it. Now that I got a closer look at you, you really are quite pretty. You should smile more. Put your hair down. Maybe some blush. I have no idea how to respond.
Watch your tongue, lest you have it cut out.
Oh my god! The haggard man froze for a second before swinging in the direction of the voice. I didn't even hear anyone come in. Okay, let's skip right along. And okay, I'm gonna have to say, despite the fact that he saved my ass, no, I'm not gonna hear you out. Honestly, no. I just want to go back to bed. It's late. His face fell fast and considerably, but recovered just as quickly. Carrick nodded, true to his word. He retrieved his items off the counter, and without another sentence spoken, stood at the door, waiting for me to unlock it. I did so slowly, not sure what to make of this newfound silence. Was he upset with me? Was he looking for an opportunity to strike? Were these to be my last few moments unlocking my own shop? Instead, the only thing he'd done was give me a soft, maybe even disappointed smile, before walking out onto the stony path and disappearing into the night. I watched him long after he was gone, looking in the spot in which he stood. There was no trace of him. For all I'd known, he could have been a specter. I would come to regret never having listened to what he had to say. He never did return, which only made it more mysterious. I never forgot the words he said to me, that I shouldn't let anyone determine my worth other than myself. It wasn't easy not being bothered by the external pressures of society, but I already worked so hard against it. I just needed a moment of weakness so I could come back stronger. I secretly wished he'd return one day, and I could properly ask him what he was going to say. Why was it so important? Time truly was a curse. Had it not existed, I could have waited in my shop forever to get an answer to my question. But I was more than certain I'd die never knowing, and I just had to accept that reality. Oh, goddamn. Anyway, that was Carved in Stone. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys do want to play this for yourselves, link to the game will be in the description below, and that was hot as hell. Oh god, there was so much of it I had to put up on Patreon, but god damn, it is so worth playing this. Like, god, why didn't I play this sooner? Oh god, like, Carrick is so, he's just so sweet, and also, like, god, so chiseled. I have no idea what rock related like dirty joke I'm gonna go with, but god, I hope that I did this game justice, because holy hell, I enjoyed it. I loved it. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you all have a lovely rest of the day, and as always, I'll be seeing you in the next video. This is Lion, signing off. Ciao.